Book 101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that are read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Whiskey Rebel, no other than Mr. Jeffrey Dunn. Welcome to Book 101 once again, Mr. Jeffrey. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Dunn, and I grew up in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area and worked on a PhD in culture studies and American literature. Met my wife there. She was from the Pacific Northwest, and we moved with our first child to Washington State. Lived for a good while on the Olympic Peninsula on the west side. Got too dark, got too dreary, moved to Spokane. And Spokane and central Washington, eastern Washington, it's Columbia Plateau, Columbia Basin environment is the setting for Whiskey Rebel. So that brings us up to Whiskey Rebel.
Yes, Mr. Jeffrey Dunn, thank you so much for sharing Whiskey Rebel to the world. So, what is the main theme of Whiskey Rebel?
Whiskey Rebel is a it's a picaresque, sort of whimsical novel, and then at the same time, it's a deep dive into the American dream, freedom, what it means to be an American, what it means to fight against that which you think is holding you back, holding you down. Starts with the tax, the whole tax issue that goes all the way back to the 1776 and the Tea Party and the all of that sort of tax revolt, and then takes us into other issues of freedom, because that's not everybody's concern. But it seems like all of us Americans certainly want to fight for something called freedom. I'm not sure it's always the same thing, though.
Certainly. So, how does the protagonist in Whiskey Rebel challenge societal expectations?
Um, well, we have a speaker, and we have the Whiskey Rebel himself. It's a bit of an on the road kind of opening, where you have the writer, the person who ostensibly is the normal person, although that's questionable. He's a shell shock Vietnam vet, and he finds this person who feels that he is the fourth generation, three times great grandfather was in the Whiskey Rebellion. And it's his lineage, his purpose in life to make tax-free whiskey. So, and Hamilton Chance is definitely a singular human being, which is to say there's nobody quite like him. He doesn't wear shoes. No matter what the temperature is, no matter what the circumstances is. He talks about getting a bottle, a beer or a bottle of whiskey between his feet and getting on his back and drinking it using his feet. He's a different kind of dude. All five characters, they aren't all main characters, but the five principal characters in the book are all what I call singular characters. They are people that you're not likely most of us to meet or hang around with, but there are more of such folks in this country than many of us would want to know are there. That's for sure.
For sure. So, what role does the setting play in the development of the story?
The setting is really for Whiskey Rebel is really I'm a place-based writer, and Radio Free Olympia is the whiskey is the Washington's Olympic Peninsula, and Wildcat. My book right after that's in the Appalachian Rust Belt. Well, this one is in a place called Moses Coulee, and if you go to Central Washington, you'll find a place called the Scablands, and the Scablands are a place where a huge ice age flood or floods took all the soil off the underlying basalt, which is from the Grand Round and other volcanoes from about 15 million years ago. It's like going to the moon, is the way I liken it. And Punksy, the speaker in the book, the writer of the book, fictional writer, that's how he describes it. It's like being on the moon. Um, it's a place where I could imagine one could get lost. One could make tax-free whiskey. Nobody would find you. Um, it's a very sort of remote, forbidding, and in that sort of high plateau desert sort of way. Also very beautiful. Also very beautiful when you learn to appreciate it, um, especially nights with constellations in the sky. Absolutely beautiful. So the setting's a big deal. The setting's very, very important. It's what everything comes out of, essentially.
So, Mr. Jeffrey, what does the title Whiskey Rebel symbolize in the context of the novel?
Well, you got two words. You got whiskey and you have rebel. Historically, this there in 1794 there was and this is discussed in the book because of Hamilton's family connections. Historically, 5 years after the ratification of our Constitution, we had our first rebellion against the United States government. Apparently, Americans are always fighting against the United States government. We may think, well, that's new to us, but hardly. Um, my relatives, the Scots Irish, and I don't know about them directly genetically, but I know that certainly the Scots Irish from which I come um, were makers of whiskey, and they lived in Western Pennsylvania, and they'd fought in the Revolution. They understood what America was supposed to be about. So when Alexander Hamilton put a tax on whiskey, his purpose was to pay the Revolutionary War veterans, because the United States government didn't have the money for it, uh, to put this excise tax. My folk, the Scots Irish, primarily said, "No, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this at all." Um, and so this whole freedom, um, wanting to be left alone, um, uh, trying to do things on your own and make it through life without a lot of help along the way, is this whiskey rebellion spirit. Although you can certainly generalize that and make it whatever you don't have to be a whiskey rebel. You can be all kinds of rebels if you want to be.
Certainly. Any kind of rebel, people. So, Mr. Jeffrey, how does the book explore the concept of rebellion, both personal and societal?
Well, there's five characters, and the first one, who we meet right before we meet the whiskey rebel Hamilton Chance, is Punksy, and he grew up in a place called Packwood, Washington, which is an actual town on Highway 12 before you get to White Pass. And it's a logger town. His mom was a librarian and his dad was a logger, and he grew up with singular people who he's very comfortable with. Um, as he begins to get into adulthood, his mom tells him that being a librarian, he needs to go to college, because that's the American dream, and he does that for a year, and that just doesn't work for him. So he sees a poster in a school that says you need to be all you can be and join the army. So he joins the army and he's shipped to Iraq. This is all before the novel starts. It's all backstory. And there's an IED that blows up his Humvee and he gets his brain scrambled. So he turns home, and as he says, the American dream just isn't working out. School's not working out. The army's not working out. So he decides to go prospecting for gold. And that's his. But as it turns out, he's actually more interested in women than he is in gold. So that's another character who gets introduced. Hamilton, he's into the whiskey side of things. Um, he meets Cherry Kozlowski, and he very much idealizes her, but she's a woman with backbone who isn't putting up with any stupid men. And she's an interesting character, and she's got her own even farther out there woman with a backbone, loyal Hannah, who tags along later on in the book. And then we have a Native American character, Sam the Man, which is uh,
Sam the man.
Hamilton's way to try and say the Salish version of salmon. So, um, because we need somebody who's gonna sell the whiskey on the black market, so he comes in, and of course he's got his own beef against the United States government and American history, being a Native American. So there's lots of character rebellion going on here, and it's not always in the same direction.
So, how does Whiskey Rebel address issues such as addiction or dependency?
Wow, interesting question. Um, these are the book opens with the Punksy just talking about where he lives and the problem of heroin, and he says that's not something he messes with, although he explains some of his experiences with others and that way. Um, there are issues in here. Obviously, Hamilton drinks an awful lot. Punksy doesn't mind drinking either, so there are alcohol issues. There are men who are not characters, but women who are victims of men who would be fair to say had sexual addictions. So these are all very much victims of these sorts of things. And I've taught in Elma, Washington, and Deer Park, Washington for 25 years and 26 years. And many folks, many families, a few students struggle with this. And what I found is people in these circumstances, in their own ways, have to in some way support one another. Nobody's a free agent. And so these five characters, at some point in the book, they all need to get together, and they need to work out their issues, so to speak, and kind of figure out how to support one another, because clearly no one else is going to do that. So that's how I think that's how most people deal with it once they recognize it's an issue.
Certainly. So, Mr. Jeffrey, how does the novel balance the internal struggles of the character with external challenges?
Wow, you're throwing me some curveballs here, Daniel. Um, no, understood. Understood. Um, these are characters who very much live in a world where external struggles are really what is what they have to deal with, because there's really not time for internal struggles for most of them. The one character who really uh, has the capacity, and I think really the family upbringing, enough of a foundation to work through this sort of thing, is Punksy, and that's what he's doing in the book. Um, he's writing about his interactions with these characters, who they are, and his own growth from childhood through struggling with what the future is going to be for himself, why he goes down this path with these four particular people. And he's really kind of analyzing along the way, as he grows from his 20s towards his 30s, who he's going to be and why he is who he is. Although there's no sense he's going to leave this area, which I think is very indicative of the people who live in places like this, as I do. You become very wedded to this sort of inner freedom, so to speak. There's not really a whole lot of people to tell you around what to do. There might be a price to pay for that, but there you go. It's how you're most comfortable.
Certainly. So, Mr. Jeffrey, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to write their own novel?
Sorry there. I have an emergency alert on my phone. Turned it off. Okay. You want to write your own novel. Wow.
Yes.
Well, you have to be comfortable to sit for a long time by yourself. You have to have something, a story to tell that's really important, that you think not only is important for you to spend time working through yourself, but also that you want to share with the world. Um, then it's a matter of finding the different routes towards publication. I've done some self publishing, which is an interesting way to go. The Whiskey Rebels hybrid published through Izzard Inc. I've had a wonderful experience doing that, although you need your own bankroll to do that. If you're lucky, you might be able to find a traditional publisher, but generally they want 20,000 people on Instagram to come with you before they'll take you on. Um, so there's a lot of that going on. Literary fiction's hard, but if you love it and that's what you want to do, it's just what you do. I mean, it's not really an issue. There are other areas. I think that nonfiction sells better. Romance novels have a niche um, that literary fiction doesn't have quite so much. Um, but you have to get up and just spend your time doing it and writing, share it with people, get feedback, people that you respect that don't want to write the story for you, but understand what you're about and what you want to do, and just go for it because it's what you want to do.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, people, if you have the passion to write, 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 and stop procrastinating.
yes, sir.
So, Mr. Jeffrey, let's talk about the characters and plot of Whiskey Rebels. What motivates the main character to rebel, and how does it affect their life?
Uh, Say again.
Yes,
I want to process that. Yeah.
what motivates the main character to rebel, and how
Uh-huh.
does it affect their life?
Right. So if there are two characters and in a sense they're kind of like it's that on the road thing. They're kind of like main characters, but the title character is Whiskey Rebel, and his motivation is simply lineage. It's family. He thinks he has a destiny, and he's going to fulfill that destiny. He also has a character struggle. I would say he would be diagnosed as ADHD. He's a drummer and he drums to calm himself down. He drums with little kids at his trailer in a dump at one point in the book. He drums and drums up the spirit of Chief Moses, who gives him his recipes. Um, but all of this is in service of his vision of what his destiny is, and that's really what he's after. That's what motivates him. Punksy, on the other hand, he's got some notion of wanting to become self-actualized, to grow as a person, and he's struggles at the beginning of the novel with trying to find where that is. And by the end of the novel, I think he's learned some things about himself. Where he goes from this point in the novel is a good question. But I can see somebody like Taika Waititi taking this book and turning it into something like Reservation Dogs. Um, uh, but that's Hamilton and Punksy have very different motivations, uh, but they're together again just because they both need a friend. They need a support system, and loneliness is a motivator too. And I think all the characters come together um,
Yes.
because of some loneliness also.
Certainly. So, Mr. Jeffrey, what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
Wow. Uh, Short term is simply to get this book into as many hands as possible. That's why I'm talking to you. I'm writing cultural commentary on American culture, music, and things on Substack and Medium. Short pieces that's going on. Long term, I'm working on a big, complicated novel of place that takes place in Spokane, Washington. Um, and I've got my two main characters, a male and a female. Um, I've got that sense of place down. That's fine. It's this one will be is much more magical realism, bringing in animal characters and historical, excuse me, characters and characters from folklore. Very much like Radio Free Olympia in a very different place. So you get a very different book.
Good luck to your goal, Mr. Jeffrey, and thank you for your advice. We are looking forward for more books like this. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Movie 101 Review, in its third season. People, third season with my co-host, Mr. Bob Lemon. For sure, our latest episode talks about the Oscar. So please do listen, Movie 101 Review, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Jeffrey, how does the ending of Whiskey Rebel rebel or provide closure or leave to the audience or readers the further interpretation?
Yes, also an interesting question. My first draft of this book didn't really have closure, mostly because I think people, realistically, people like this just can live kind of day to day and get by. But that's not a very satisfying way to go. So at the end of this book, we come to we come all together in Moses Coulee with um, a, a good bit of the fresh whiskey right um, out of the still, and each one of the characters passes the jug and has something to say, and then Punksy finishes just with his own thoughts about what he's learned and what it is that he's gathered from this experience. So we get to hear from all five characters, and then we hear from Punksy finishes up his little writing project at the end.
Mr. Jeffrey Dunn, thank you so much for sharing Whiskey Rebel to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yes, please. Um, I have five of them. I've got Dream Fishing, the Little Spokane. I also got to have a book of poetry, Hubcap collection plate. The big novel Radio Free Olympia on the Olympic Peninsula, Wildcat and Appalachian Romance, takes place in the Appalachian Rust Belt, and this one, Whiskey Rebel, um, it's a hoot. It's a lot of fun. I think it's the easiest, most satisfying read from page to page.
Lots of fun, people. Let's support Mr. Jeffrey Dunn because if you support him, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Jeffrey, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's been fun as always.
More to come, people. See you soon. So thank you, Mr. Jeffrey. If you have a new book to publish, just come and read book